Uh, to understand this, we must start from the beginning. In the 14th century, when the Portuguese, start their voyage and exploration to discover different sea routes to connect them to India and Asia to engage in spice trading. By bypassing the Ottoman Empire, this was the period when the Europeans were interested in exploration, and exploration was considered as a competition among the European powers. The Portuguese were the first to engage in exploration and sea voyage. Okay. Why is Africa poor and why Africa is weak? 12th century, 13th century, Africa was not poor and Africa was not weak. In fact, 12th century, 13th century, this was the period African kingdoms started expanding into empires. We have great African kingdoms like Benin Kingdom, Benin Empire, and Mali Empire. So when the European came, when they arrived, they first arrived in West Africa. They told the African rulers that they are, traders and explorers. They started, interfering in African politics. This was in the 14th century. So, but mind you, there are prominent empires existing during that period, like Mali. The founder of the empire was called Mansa Sunjata Keita. He was a prince before he became an emperor. Before he took power, his brother was the king. Before Mali became an empire, it was a kingdom called Manding Kingdom. Manding Kingdom. Yes, it was called Manding Kingdom. It was Manding Kingdom. Yes. So the kingdom started, conquering some state, vassal state, expanding the territory. So when the Manguru Conte, hi, thank you for joining the live party. Yes. So when Sumanguru Conte annexed the kingdom, Sunjata Keita was exiled then by his brother Dankaran Tumane. Yes. So Sunjata Keita had to run with his mother, Sonkolong Konde, to exile. So fast forwarding the history, was ruling the people of Manding, the Mandinka people brutally. The Mandinka people decided to go and call Sunjata Keita, Mansa Sunjata Keita. So he came and then the Mandinka people revolt against Sumanguru Conte. They fought a bloodiest battle in Kerina. The period was 1235. That was the era. That was the year, 1235. Yes, coming back to the subject, why is Africa poor? Why is Africa poor? Africa was, stable politically, like I said, in the 14th century. In the 14th century, it was strong militarily. It has different kingdoms and empires, but the decline of Africa began in the 14th century when the Europeans began coming to Africa. The Portuguese were the first European powers that started, controlling African territories. That was in the 1415. They first captured Moroccan territories. They captured Moroccan territories in the 1415. Yes. Then the European powers started colonizing Africa. Yes, capturing territories. Before the 18th century, 1884, 1885, Berlin Conference. Before Berlin Conference, yes, there were African powers, there were European powers who already control African territories. Yes. So 1884, 1885, Berlin Conference. All European powers converged at Berlin to avoid European tribal war. Yes. So when they converged at Berlin, the German Chancellor, yes, initialized among the European powers. They scrambled for Africa. They divide African territories into different countries. The Germans had their share. The French had their share. And the Britain had their share. So no African leaders were invited in that conference, Berlin Conference. No African leaders were invited in that conference, Berlin Conference. So African territories were divided arbitrarily among the European powers. They took over territories. Like I said before the Berlin Conference, some territories were controlled by the Europeans, like St. Louis. You have James Island and other African countries were controlled by the colonial masters, like some islands. So, like I said, Africa is a very rich continent. So, in the early 14th century to 15th century, most African empires began to decline. In the 14th century, 15th century, most African empires, like Mali Empire, Kabu Empire, declined in 1867. So during that period, the Europeans were already here in Africa, exploiting our resources and interfering in African politics, in the empire's affairs. So some African leaders were, resisting against the colonial rules. Like when you come to the Gambia, we have a ruler called Mansa Burungai Sonko of Nyomi, North Bank region. He revolted against the colonial rule. He fought with the British, called Bara War. We have the video in our channel. So when you go to other African countries like Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, we have other Africans who revolt and resist colonial rule. So they came to Africa, captured Africans, and then sent them to Europe and Brazil and Portugal as slaves. Yes, they enslaved our ancestors, claiming that Africa are not able to rule themselves. That was their belief, that Africans cannot govern themselves. Africans were savages. They cannot govern themselves. So we must govern them. Thank you, Justin Scott. Thank you for joining the live. Okay. Yes, Africa is totally weak. Yes, we are in the 19th century. Africans were, their lands were taken. Their mineral resources, gold and diamonds, were also taken. I'm sorry, it's raining here. If the noise is quite, I'm outside, it's raining. Yes. So it was terrible, honestly. Yes, Jocelyn says, no, your own people captured your own and brought them to the Europeans. Yeah, that is quite right. Because what was happening during back then, or during that period, some Africans were capturing their fellow Africans and selling them to Europe in exchange for guns and other valuable materials. Yes, that was happening here. Yes, that was happening in Africa here. But what resulted the Europeans, colonizing Africa was lack of unity. The African kingdoms and African empires were fighting among themselves. Internal instability was one of the factors. One of the factors that lead to the decline of most prominent empires in Africa. Yes. So the Europeans used that as an opportunity. They used a tactic called divide and rule. So when they knew that Africans were not united among ourselves, they, use a tactic called divide and rule. They will go to an emperor or a ruler, instigate him against the other ruler. So they will be fighting among themselves, giving the European the chance to steal our natural resources, exploit our people, capture African as slaves, and sell them in Europe and America as, to work in the plantation. And still now, 21st century is still happening. Our African politicians, our African leaders remain blinded to these atrocities happening to Africans. Yes, Jason, divide and rule tactics, that is what they use. In fact, the British Empire, did a lot of chaos in the world. Not only Africa. When you go to the Middle East and visit Asia, when they were, controlling the people, when their empire was at its peak, they were capturing people, sending them as slaves, maltreating the people. Collecting tax without, considering the people, supporting them financially and improving their life. Yes. So Africans still will remain blinded, and Europeans are still coming back in a form of neo-colonialism, controlling our natural resources, controlling our politicians, controlling our key sectors, with the introduction of globalization and privatization, controlling our key sectors that African can utilize and use to, to be generating revenue, to improve the living standard of Africans. But the politicians are manipulated by these colonial masters. That is why still now, the colonial masters are still in Africa. They refuse to go. Yes. It's indeed very sad. African political system is corrupt and rotten to its core. Yes, thank you very much, Jason Scott. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I try to be. Yes, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Yes. Indeed, it is a tragedy. The British, like I said, still now, the chaos they created in the world still now is still in existence. When they left India after the Second World War, their resources were, depleted. They were expanding their empire without the enough resources and, finance. They had to pull. So they had to pull back, resulting many African countries gaining their independence, and Asian countries like India, China. They control part of China, but India was completely colonized by the British Empire. So when they left India, they left a land, dispute or land issue between the China and the India. That's why China and India, there is still an issue between them because of land issue left by the British Empire. India has the same problem with Pakistan. When you come to Africa also, the same problem. So you see why Africa is poor? Africa is poor because of corrupt political system, because all our political leaders are bought by these colonial masters. In fact, the institutions we have, like ECOWAS, OAU, that is African Union, are undermined. They are undermined by the Europeans. So they can have the chance to exploit our resources to benefit their citizens, to benefit Europe, while Africa remain in poverty and destitution. Some African countries, when you go to visit some African countries, their health sector is in shambles. People are dying with menial diseases that can be easily cured. Yes, corruption is one of the factors, Jason. Almost 95% of African presidents and African politicians are corrupt. They are corrupt. Can you imagine, look at Nigeria, with a population of 200 plus million people in Nigeria. Nigeria remains as at least third to fourth rich oil country in the world, not Africa, in the world. And yet Nigeria remains to be the poorest country in the world, in Africa and in the world. Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the richest oil country in the world, but yet it remains the poorest country. What causes that? Bad leadership. Bad leadership. In fact, that is the African problem. Bad leadership. You know, leadership is not about power. It's about selfless service you deliver to your people. It's indeed very sad. Our resources, African resources, are not benefiting Africans. African resources are not benefiting Africa. Look at Congo. Congo, the country of Patrice Emery Lumumba. Patrice Emery Lumumba, after Congo gained independence, Patrice Emery Lumumba was assassinated in 1961. Go to Congo, Togo. The Togo's president, I forgot his name, Stefano Olympio. The Togo president, Stefano Olympio, was also assassinated in 1963. The problem with Africa, the European and America, any African leader that stood for Africans and seeing that Africans benefit from its own resources, they get rid of that leader. Kwame Nkrumah said this Kwame Nkrumah said this in 1963 at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, when all the African countries converge at Ethiopia to have, conference at Addis Ababa. Yes, thank you very much. Jason said, so Nigeria has plenty of oil, but still poor due to political corruption and politicians. Yes, that is true. This is the case of Africa, not only Nigeria. We have other countries in Africa, like Congo. Can you imagine Congo mineral resources? It's roughly 30-something trillion. Excuse me, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can Google it. Congo, the Congo natural. Congo remain the richest country on earth. Congo Kinshasa, Republic of Congo, is the richest country on earth. Yes, Congo is the richest country on earth. But yet it remains the poorest country in the world. Do you know why? Because of conflict. Conflict. Yes. Thank you very much, Jason. Really appreciate you. Yes. Congo remains the poorest country in the world, not only Africa, in the world, because of conflict. The Western powers, the Europeans, they are sponsoring these, rebel groups to create chaos, to create fear. That's what they feed on, to create chaos so that they can have the chance to, exploit our resources. This is a tragedy. This is what is happening in Africa. Our political, elections, most political elections in Africa are rigged. It's very sad, very, very sad. And Africans remain in destitution, poverty. Most Africans do not have like hope. Because the governments do not create the, the means for them, for people to, yes, benefit themselves by creating jobs, manufacturing industries to facilitate this. This is why Africa remains poor. This is why Africa remains poor. So when in 1963, when African leaders met at Addis Ababa with the plan to unite Africa, to have United States of Africa. It was 32 head of state that emerged or that converged at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Kwame Nkrumah was among the prominent speakers in that conference room. Gamal Ahmad Nasser was there, the leader of Egypt. Julius Kambarage Nyerere was there, and the leader of Guinea, Sékou Touré, I believe. And Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia. Kwame Nkrumah told these leaders that we must not leave this room without one army. We must not leave this room without one economic system. We must not leave this system, this room, without unifying Africa. He told them that the colonial masters, if we do not unite to create one system, to have one foreign policy, the Europeans are going to come back. The colonial masters are going to come back, and what Kwame Nkrumah said was true. They came back. They came back. They came back in a new form. They came back wearing masks. Mask of what? Neo-colonialism. They gave African countries their independence. They said you have your independence now. You can have your after the Second World War, 1945. After the end of Second World War, they gave African countries their independence because the British couldn't control their huge empire. They gave them their independence, but they made them sign a pact that they can come and then interfere. That's what they did. They came back in a form of neo-colonialism, interfering with our government, stealing our natural resources, privatizing our key institutions. It's very sad. Yes, thank you very much, Jason Scott. Have a wonderful night. Thank you very much. Yes. It's very, very sad. And this is happening in Africa. Africa's natural resources is exploited by European imperialists. And African politicians, African leaders are seeing this, watching this, without doing a drastic move. That is why, like I mentioned, the Europeans and the Americans will never, ever like an African leader who stands for his people and protecting the African resources. That is why they killed Gaddafi. Gaddafi's scene was, I'm not going to allow you to exploit Africa. I'm not going to allow you to tell us Africans what to do. And they killed him in 2011, I believe. They killed Patrice Lumumba. They killed Silifano Olympio. They killed Kenneth Kaunda and other prominent African leaders, and Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. Why do they kill them? Because those people defy the Europeans. That is why they are doing everything in their power to get rid of Ibrahim Traoré, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso and the leader of Niger and and Mali. Because those people are the true son of Africa. We keep repeating this and keep saying this. Africa must be liberated. Africa must be liberated. And the liberation of Africa will not come if Africans do not decolonize their mind, do decolonize the education system. As the saying goes, the Europeans, they came, they conquered, and they ruled. So they are writing their own narrative, the propaganda. So making us Africans doubt ourselves, doubt our ability, doubt our own history. For example, let's look at Kabu Empire. Kabu Empire was the empire that has a significant impact in West Africa. The empire collapsed or declined in 1867. The last king was Janke Wali Sane. So, but this empire controlled most African, West African territories. Kabu Empire was a significant empire in West Africa here. It was organized politically, backed by a strong army. Mali Empire the same. So, but when they conquered, when they finally colonized Africa, they changed our history. They write their own narratives. They make us African believe that we cannot survive without the Europeans. We are savages. They let us believe that we are savages. We are uncivilized. But don't forget, civilization started in Africa. Civilization started in Africa. When Africa was civilized, Europeans were still living in caves. When the Africans were building the pyramids, Europeans were living in the caves. It's not racism. This is a fact. This is a fact. The exploitation of Africa must stop. The African resources must benefit Africans. Africans are dying of hunger. Africans are dying of disease that can be easily cured because of lack of medicine. Because of lack of better health care service. Corrupt politicians. This is why Africa remain poor and remain weak. Africa is the weakest continent in the world. Africa is the weakest continent in the world. Africans must start learning their own history. The moment we know our own history, we will be able to know where we are going or heading to. But if your history is narrated by somebody else, you begin to doubt yourself. Africans must start uniting. Africa is diverse culturally, but that diversity must be a force that unites us together. We must break that barrier. That was the reason why European divide Africa, scrambled Africa in 1884 to 1885. To divide us in order to control us. We must break that barrier. If we are able to break the barrier, then Africa can begin uniting now. You can unite to have one government, a loose government, one military, one foreign policy, then Africa can begin heading to a new direction. We are entering or emerging in multipolar world. The world is shifting into multipolar world. For about 45 to 50 years, America and Europe remain the leader of the world. American hegemon. Europe and America remain the unipolar. So Africa and other countries like China, Russia, and South countries must come together. Africa must be liberated. It's high time Africans wake up to themselves and liberate Africans from the suffering. Because African African political system is corrupt. So the most politicians do not quite care about Africa or the country they lead. No, they are all puppets. The ECOWAS, OAU, they are becoming puppet institutions. They are becoming a puppet institutions because it is undermined. It is undermined. Yes, because if OAU or African Union is not undermined, when the NATO, American, European ally, when they came to Libya to assassinate Gaddafi, African Union must resist that. But they sat and watched Gaddafi to be killed. It's very sad. It's very, very sad. The main reason why African Union was formed to protect the sovereignty of Africa, all the African countries that are member. But if they are sitting down watching Europeans interfering with African affairs, exploiting our resources, it's terrible. ECOWAS, the same. We must begin to realize that Africa and Africans need to liberate themselves. It's really, really sad. If you visit some African countries, children are not getting vaccinated. Children are not receiving better educations that they deserve. And let us not forget, Africa is blessed in all aspects. Our soil is rich in mineral and support agriculture, good agriculture, and it is blessed with natural resources. But Africa is not utilizing all this. Instead, the Europeans are the one benefiting from those. This is very sad. Very, very sad. It's very sad. Africa, in order to remove Africa from this, we need African revolution. And for that to happen, the European must know that they cannot interfere with Africans' politics. They cannot exploit our resources. It's indeed a tragedy. It's indeed a tragedy. Yes, thank you very much. I must end the live because it's almost 44 minutes into the live. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, you can watch some of our video in our channel. Thank you.